Hello, hello. Welcome to Talk About It, a video series where experts and people with lived experiences will discuss issues and topics around substance use disorder. This series was created by Partnership to End Addiction, a national nonprofit that helps families prevent and treat addiction. Partnership to End Addiction provides free, confidential support for families looking for answers for themselves and their loved ones. I am GloZell, your host. In this episode, we will be discussing the power of relationships and roles of parents and families. Today, we have with us Denise Mariano. Denise Mariano leads family support and advocacy at Partnership to End Addiction. Denise is also part of a family in recovery from addiction. We also have Carleah Summers. Carleah Summers is a mother in long-term recovery and a recovery advocate. After her family was personally affected by addiction, she made it her mission to keep families together instead of tearing them apart. We also have with us Bill Williams. Bill Williams is a nationally recognized recovery advocate and host of the radio show Kingfisher Project. Bill started his advocacy efforts in 2012 after losing his son William at age 24. All right, these questions are for all of you. Too often families are seen as part of the problem when in fact, they can be part of the solution. Please share with us why families play such a critical role and how this informs your work today.
Thank you, GloZell. Such an important question. What we hear often at every pathway, every time we seek support is that we're part of the problem. We're enablers, we're codependents. They tell us to kick our kids out. Your kids are going to die because of you. They must hit rock bottom, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, and let go with love and go to Al-Anon. And that's what we hear at every turn when we're seeking any kind of support and solutions. And the other glimpse I'd like to give you is so often the families are not just getting this one-size-fits-all advice and this tired narrative that we're part of the problem, but so often the families and their loved ones are denied any care. I know for our son, we were denied care for close to 4 years by our health insurance company, right? So what does that look like? Not only are we in fear that our son's going to die because there's no support systems, but also now we have to put on many hats, right? We have to be their support system. We have to be their parent. And now we have to be their advocate. And so often what I say to families is loving someone and supporting them and being involved in their care is not enabling. And so to go back to the solutions piece, to let go and go to Al-Anon, there is no one size fits all when we support families. Families need options. Al-Anon might work for some, but Al-Anon is about a model based on self-care. We need solutions for families. And what does that look like? It means communicating with our son, understanding that their behaviors make sense, understanding that this is not personal. How could they do this to us, right? It's about lifting them up and instead of letting them hit rock bottom. So why are the solutions? Because we know our kids and we know them the best. And if we empower families with a solution-based model, with tools of communication, of their behaviors, avoiding conflict, really helping the families to be cohesive. Like my husband and I in the beginning where he's like, why doesn't he just stop? It was just us helping and learning and growing together. And we can be part of the solution. We can no longer just go to a 12-step program, which certainly helps people. I'm not bashing 12-step programs, but we need a solution-based model where we give our families a toolbox and empower them to stay connected, not let go.
Speaking from my own personal experience, I really feel like my family went through the same shaming and guilt that I did for the exact same reasons. Even though I was the one with the substance use disorder, I felt like my family was really dragged right along with me because, yes, they're codependent, they're enablers. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And again, we're removing the resources. And instead of telling the families what they can do, we pointed out everything that they weren't doing or shouldn't do. The one word that I use that a lot of people don't implement is boundaries. It's not about enabling, it's about setting boundaries. So I know personally for me, my parents never stopped loving me. They never gave up hope on me, but they set boundaries with me. And I learned to respect those boundaries. And because of them, I was able to, make it to treatment and enter long-term recovery.
I'm going to go right to rock bottom. There's only one thing that's rock bottom, and that's death. Death is rock bottom. As long as people are alive, there's a chance for hope, there's a chance to move on. That's why we need harm reduction, to keep people alive so that the hope is there and they can gradually find their way out and get some help from their family and other people.
Who's to define what rock bottom is, right? We can no longer give this one size fits all advice to families and those in recovery. It's shameful, right? If it, like Bill said, what if that rock bottom is death? And then Carleah is setting boundaries. Even setting boundaries, there's no one size fits all, right? My first boundary was my son calling me and saying, I'm hungry. Can you send me some money? And I said, I can't send you money, but I will send you a pizza. I will send you a sub and I will feed you, right? So again, everybody's boundaries are very different too.
We often hear about setting boundaries, but we don't hear enough about the positive reinforcement. And why is positive reinforcement matters so much?
Those struggling with substance use are not bad people. They are good people trying to get well. It's so important to recognize that, like any other medical condition. And so when we can catch our loved ones being good, throw them a nugget of love. And that's as simple as, I'm proud of you, right? We know from science and evidence that when we support our loved ones and lift them up and throw those nuggets of love and let them know we're in their corner, it means the world to them. I'm so grateful that my son, who's now in recovery for 7 years, shares that with me. Shares with me, like, when I called you from the streets and you answered the phone and supported me, that got me through another night.
I think positive reinforcement is definitely something that gets overlooked. It's the reason why we celebrate every milestone in recovery. So, for those of us who work 12-step programs, why we pick up a chip for 24 hours and 30 days and 60 days, because every day of sobriety is a win. It is a struggle. It is a daily struggle. And then you throw things like the pandemic on top of it. And I mean, it's every day is to be celebrated. It truly is. And so when you remove the positive reinforcements that really make sobriety what it is for a person with substance use disorders, it makes it very difficult because we need that. For so long, we have been told that we're worthless, that we're never going to get better, that we're never going to amount to anything. And so those positive reinforcements aren't small, they're huge. And when someone just says, I'm proud of you, it makes all the difference in the world from getting from this 24 hours to the next. And so I hope that people understand that those words are so pivotal in a person with a substance use disorder's life, and it can really make all the difference in the world for them entering long-term recovery.
What do we mean when we say everybody's journey is unique and there is a no one-size-fit-all approach?
People are taking pain relievers, pain-killing drugs. These drugs are painkillers. There's a reason they're taking drugs. They're in pain. What is the pain? The pain that I'm in for something is the pain that you're in for something. What am I suffering from? What are you suffering from? So we have to deal with two things. We have to deal with the addiction to the drug and the cravings that creates. But also, once we get that under control, we need to think about what is the illness, what is the mental health problem that's going on. And that's why there's no one path, because the mental health problems are as unique as, if it were that simple, we'd all go to the same therapist and say the same thing.
So often the focus is on substances, right? When it's so much more than that. I know for my son, his final path to recovery was just feeling part of society, to feeling he had a social network. He played softball in a recovery league, recovery bowling, going to recovery baseball games. That's what worked for him, right? We all know that they're using substances for a reason, but we have to give them a life after that. It's not just about the substances. And my feeling is, and I'd love to hear from you, Carleah, the best path of recovery is the path that works for you.
One of the differences for me was I had a child, so my recovery was a lot different than a person, a single person, and so where others were able to go to recovery activities and do these things, I was a mother, and so it really changed the trajectory of my recovery for me. And I had a lot of hurdles to jump, and a lot of things because I had to worry about childcare and affordable housing and transportation and these things. And so my pathway was probably a little bit more curvy than some people's, but the important part is that we get there, and so celebrating that an individual gets into recovery is the important part, not that the individual was using substances.
We can no longer go into a room of support and have a person standing on the other side of the room speaking to 40 different families, 40 different unique families, each one different, different children, different loved ones, different spouses, and say, again, you're part of the problem, let go, and just, there's nothing you can do. They can only want to help themselves. We can no longer accept that one size fits all advice. And sadly, because families don't know that there are other options, because families don't know about the partnership to end addiction, it should be up on the SAMHSA website, it should be everywhere. That's all they're told, they start to believe it. And let's go back to the 100,000 people that we're losing and then the 40 million people struggling. It's unacceptable.
Why is support, self-care so essential for families experiencing addiction?
You have no idea how draining it is. The anxiety, the sense of dread, the anger, the frustration, the mix of emotions that you feel as a family. And if you're doing that without support, it makes craziness crazier.
I could remember, thousands of nights just, fearing I would lose my son, right? Not going out because what if I came home and he wasn't there anymore? I had a serious heart attack, ended up in a hospital with tons of stents. And it was at that time that I realized that I have to do better in order to help support my family. And it was about a doctor coming in and saying to me, self-care can mean many different things, right? It doesn't mean I have to go on a yoga mat, which is so helpful, by the way. But for me at that time, it's about baby steps. And for me, the advice was to read just one page in a book, because I had said to my doctor, if I watch TV, I look through it. No matter what I do, all I do is I feel hopeless and I don't know what to do. I'm scared. So I read that one page when I got home a few days later. And that year I read 70 books. So there is no definition, what we define as our own self-care. It's individual. It worked for me, right? It was the only time I can get out of my head. In the beginning, 5 minutes. And, the next week, maybe a half hour, and the next week, an hour. But it's what worked for me. And so it's so critical for us to take care of the rest of our family, including our siblings. But I want to make it really important to say that we can start in baby steps, and it's what works for you.
My self-care is just prayer time for me, stepping away from the craziness. My life is filled with helping other individuals, which I'm very blessed to do. But I have to remind myself, if I'm not any good, I'm not any good to anyone else. And so I have to step back. Sometimes it's just sitting in the quiet, as a mother and wearing so many hats. There's not much time to really, go out and do a ton of things. But for me today, it's just been peace and quiet. I just like to hear silence some days.
Sure, I'd like to add also, personally, for me, self-care involved seeing a therapist, having that 45, 50 minutes a week to just talk about what was going on with me, how I felt about things, how I saw them, having a wise person sit opposite me and listen to what I had to say.
I just want to give one more example because so often we don't talk about the siblings, but really important that we think of their self-care. And it could be, again, either catch them being good. So often we're so consumed in the one that is struggling that we don't pay attention to the child that's doing everything wonderfully, right? And so just really being mindful of that. And that it could be as small as what we did with our family, was create like a date night. So one week I would have a date with my daughter, the next week with our son, and again catch them being good too. And so important because that helped create a waterfall effect of unconditional love for their brother in lieu of anger, frustration, and sometimes hatred, right? So when we think about the family, I think we often just not our own self care, but what does the self care look like for our family in totality, if that makes sense?
Yes, that makes plenty of sense. What advice would you give other families going through this?
The advice that I would give is to the families, don't give up hope. If we give up hope, what else is left, right? There are organizations like the partnership. We support the supporters. Everything we do is free. We know the landscape of families. So whether that's a peer coach, our helpline, even our help and hope by text. I often think, what if I had this help and hope by text that just told me at 2 o'clock in the morning I wasn't alone, or that told me at 3 o'clock in the morning about harm reduction, what I can do and put naloxone in my house, or it told me at 4 o'clock in the morning when I should have been practicing self-care. Yes, I know, and probably sleeping, but it's a beacon of hope for family. And then again, my hope that professionals and the experts and these so-called experts, that might be listening here, can we please stop shaming and stigmatizing and judging families? Instead, can we support them, give them compassion, respect them, and give them some dignity because it'll go a really long way. I hope they can learn from us. I think that there's nothing like lived experience, so let us help you. I think that would be my two pieces of advice.
That's all we have time for today. I truly want to thank Bill, Carleah, and Denise for joining us. For more information and resources, please visit drugfree.org. I am your host, GloZell, for Talk About It, a series by Partnership to End Addiction.